Ever get that feeling, like you're on this massive road trip and you're thinking, okay, almost there, I can practically see the destination, and bam, another obstacle pops up.
Ugh, yeah, I know that feeling all too well.
Well, that's pretty much where our listener finds the Israelites in the sources they shared, wouldn't you say?
Mm.
They're so close to Canaan, the land they've been yearning for, and yet they hit a major snag. It's a pretty crucial point in their journey, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we'll be diving into today, this whole situation with, well, the rebellion, the snake bites, can't forget those, and that bizarre solution with the bronze serpent on a pole. Plus, we'll touch on how the leadership starts to shift from Moses to Joshua, all based on the listener's material, of course.
Right, exactly. Speaking of which, they sent us a really diverse mix, historical accounts, some learning materials, really gives us a lot to unpack.
Definitely a rich landscape, yeah.
So let's try to pull out the key takeaways, see what it all means, maybe find some aha moments along the way. But before we get into all that, let's remind ourselves where the Israelites are in their journey. They've had that incredible exodus from Egypt, witnessed miracle after miracle in the wilderness, but they also had that massive faith crisis back at Kadesh Barnea, what was it, like 38 years before this?
Yeah, about that. And that, unfortunately, as the sources point out, led to a whole lot of wandering, mostly in that wilderness area west of Edom, around Mount Seir. And it's important to remember, even during those decades, God was still providing for them. Like in Deuteronomy 2, it states pretty clearly, "These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you. You have lacked nothing."
Wow, 40 years. That's a long time to be taken care of.
Really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? Especially considering how quickly they seem to forget those blessings when a new frustration pops up.
Oh, for sure. It's a pattern we still see today, right?
Sadly, yeah.
So, okay, we've got the Israelites. They've been on this journey for almost 40 years, maybe 8 months or so left till they could finally reach Canaan. You'd think they'd be over the moon, ready to go, right?
No thing.
But nope, that old impatience rears its head and the complaints start rolling in again.
Almost like clockwork.
And it's interesting, isn't it, what they actually complain about? Numbers 21, one of the historical sources, lays it out. They grumble about the lack of water, which is wild considering everything they've seen. But what really caught my eye was their absolute disdain for the worthless food. Like, seriously.
Yeah, that's a head scratcher for sure. You gotta wonder what had shifted in their hearts to make them view this miraculous food as, worthless.
Especially because it wasn't just some basic rations, right? We were talking about manna, the bread from heaven. This stuff had literally sustained them for almost 4 decades, every single day except for the Sabbath. And the learning materials you sent even mentioned that it could be prepared in different ways, so it wasn't like they were stuck eating the same bland thing day in and day out.
Good point.
So it seems less about the food itself and more about, I don't know, maybe just a weariness with the journey, this sort of projecting their dissatisfaction onto God's provision.
That's a really insightful observation. And the sources highlight that the manna wasn't just about filling your stomachs. It served a much deeper purpose. It was a daily test of their obedience. Would they follow God's instructions about how to gather it? It was meant to cultivate humility, that daily dependence on God, to teach them to live by faith. So to call it worthless, it really shows how deep their discontent had become, this complete failure to recognize God's constant faithfulness. It's almost like the very fact that it was a constant miracle made them take it for granted.
Yeah, like they just completely forgot about all the amazing things they'd seen God do.
Exactly.
So they're complaining about the very thing that's a constant, tangible reminder of God's care. So what happens? How does God respond to this?
Oh, he responds. Immediately, and it's not pretty, he sends these fiery serpents among them. And let me tell you, the sources don't sugarcoat it. Many people died from the bites.
Fiery serpents? That sounds pretty intense.
It was. The fiery part probably refers to that intense burning sensation from the venom. One of the sources, that Lesson 34 PDF, even suggests they might have been carpet vipers. Those are particularly nasty. Their bite can be fatal within days because of all the internal bleeding. It paints a pretty vivid and grim picture of the consequences of their actions.
Yeah, no kidding. It makes their sin feel a lot more real, a lot more serious.
For sure. And, one source points out something interesting. This was only the second time during this whole journey that the Israelites actually confessed their sin.
Oh, right. The first time was back at Kadesh Barnea. But that time it felt more like they were just trying to regain control after their mess up.
Yeah, exactly. This time, though, with, death literally staring them in the face, it feels like their regret might have been a bit more genuine.
Well, you'd hope so, right?
You would. Anyway, their confession leads Moses to plead with God on their behalf, and that's when things take a really unexpected turn. The remedy God provides is, well, it's not what you'd expect.
Okay, let's talk about this remedy,
Yeah.
because it's strange, to say the least. So they're complaining, which leads to this really serious consequence. But then God, instead of just taking the snakes away, he tells Moses to make a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. And anyone who'd been bitten, all they had to do was look at it, and they'd live.
That's it. Sounds almost too easy, doesn't it?
Right, like you'd expect some complex ritual or something.
But that simplicity, that's kind of the whole point. The healing wasn't because the bronze itself was magical or anything. The sources are crystal clear on that. It was about faith, pure and simple. They had to trust God's word, believe in his provision, even if it seemed totally bizarre.
So the symbol of the plague, the serpent, becomes the very thing that heals them.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. I can almost imagine some people just standing there, looking at this bronze snake on a stick, thinking, this is ridiculous.
Oh, I'm sure there were plenty.
Maybe they felt like they were beyond help after all their complaining. Or maybe they tried to come up with their own solutions. But the point is, those who refused to look, for whatever reason, pride, doubt, feeling unworthy, they didn't make it.
It really emphasizes the importance of personal responsibility, of accepting God's provision even when it doesn't make sense to us.
Absolutely.
And the sources really highlight how this whole event is a huge example of God's grace. Their sin was what brought the judgment, but God, in his mercy, provides a way out. It wasn't about earning forgiveness, it was about believing and looking.
It makes you think, how often do we reject simple solutions just because they don't fit our expectations?
All the time, probably.
It's a good reminder, even when we mess up, there's a path to healing. We just gotta have faith in God's provision. So after all this drama, the story shifts a bit, focusing more on what's next for the Israelites and this change in leadership that's on the horizon.
Right. With Canaan seemingly within reach, God gives Moses a pretty significant, though bittersweet, task. He's told to climb Mount Abarim, Mount Nebo specifically, to see the promised land with his own eyes. But then he's told he won't be entering it.
Oh man, that must have been tough.
Can you imagine?
Leading these people for so long, only to be told you won't be crossing the finish line with them. The sources remind us this was a consequence of that time he didn't uphold God's holiness in front of everyone.
It's a reminder that even the greatest leaders are held accountable for their actions.
No one gets a free pass.
Exactly. But even facing this disappointment, Moses is still worried about the people he's been leading for all these years. He tells God he's concerned about them being like sheep without a shepherd.
Which makes sense. They need someone strong and capable to guide them after he's gone.
Exactly. It shows how dedicated he was to their future, even if he wouldn't be a part of it in the way he'd hoped.
So God addresses that concern by choosing Joshua, son of Nun, to be Moses' successor. What was it about Joshua that made him the right guy for the job? What do the sources say?
They highlight a few key things. Firstly, Joshua had been working closely with Moses, so he's got loyalty and understands what the role entails. He's described as a man in whom is the Spirit, meaning he's empowered by God for this. And crucially, he was one of the two spies, along with Caleb, who believed God could give them Canaan back at Kadesh Barnea.
Oh, right. Totally different from the fear and doubt everyone else was showing.
Exactly. So that past display of faith, it clearly marked him as different.
Yeah, it seems like that was a big factor in him being chosen. Did Moses actually rename him? I remember something about that.
He did. He changed his name from Hoshea, which means save, to Joshua, meaning Yahweh saves.
Wow, that's a pretty significant change.
Right. It emphasizes that God is the true deliverer and Joshua is his chosen leader. And another detail from the sources, Joshua was from the tribe of Ephraim, a tribe destined for leadership. It wasn't a random pick, it was part of a bigger plan.
Interesting. So how did this transfer of power actually happen?
Yeah.
Was it just an announcement? There must have been some sort of ceremony or something, right?
Oh, yeah, there was a whole process. Moses was told to lay his hand on Joshua, commissioning him officially in front of Eleazar the priest and the whole congregation. It was a public declaration of Joshua's new leadership role. Then Moses had to give him some of his authority to make sure the people would obey him.
Checks and balances, got to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And importantly, the sources repeat that God's Spirit was upon Joshua, empowering him, just like it had empowered Moses.
To make sure he was equipped for the huge responsibility of leading them into the promised land.
Precisely. It shows the continuity of God's guidance, even with the change in leadership.
Really interesting to see how deliberate it all was. Okay, let's zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture here. We keep talking about these 40 years, but can we really grasp what those years actually meant?
It was a whole generation, right? 38 of those 40 years, they were stuck wandering in that wilderness west of Edom, all because of that rebellion back at Kadesh.
The Edomites wouldn't let them pass, so they had to take this huge detour around their territory down by the Gulf of Aqaba. It wasn't exactly a smooth ride.
Not at all. It really drives home the long-term consequences of their lack of faith.
And the thing is, even with all the complaining and rebelling they did during those 38 years, and it sounds like there was a lot of it, the sources keep emphasizing God's faithfulness.
Absolutely.
It's amazing, isn't it? No matter how many times they messed up, he kept his promises. He provided water, sometimes literally out of a rock, gave them victory in battles, even stopped Balaam from cursing them, turned those curses into blessings.
It's a powerful testament to his love and commitment, even when they didn't deserve it.
For sure. Now, this whole thing with the bronze serpent, it wasn't just a one-time event that everyone forgot about, right? Your sources hint that it becomes important later on in the story.
Right. The Lesson 34 PDF specifically mentions that this will be referenced by, and I quote, a very important teacher.
Ooh, mysterious.
Right. It points to a deeper prophetic meaning that'll unfold later on. This event, it becomes a symbol, a reference point for understanding God's saving actions in different contexts.
Wow, adds a whole other layer to it. Speaking of connections, there was something in one of the optional activities about a possible link to modern medical symbols, right?
Yeah, that's a fascinating little tidbit. It talks about the rod of Asclepius, which, as you know, is that snake wrapped around a staff.
A medical symbol, yeah.
Exactly. Now, Asclepius was a god in Greek mythology connected with healing. The source suggests that maybe the Greeks heard about the bronze serpent story, maybe through interactions with Jewish culture, and adapted it into their own mythology. But it's important to note that Moses lived way before the Asclepius myth popped up, so we don't really know for sure if there's a direct connection. It's an interesting thought, though.
Definitely something to ponder.
For sure.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways you think our listeners should remember from this part of the Israelites' journey?
Well, I'd say, firstly, the consequences of impatience and lack of trust, even after experiencing so much good. Secondly, how God's grace and mercy shine through, even when we mess up, and how he provides solutions, even if they seem odd at first. And lastly, the importance of leadership transitions, how God ensures his plan continues even when people change.
Big themes, right?
Yes.
Faith, obedience, God's provision. They go way beyond this specific story. It makes you think about your own life, doesn't it?
Totally. Think about those times when you're feeling restless, dissatisfied, even though you're surrounded by good things.
Oh, I know those times.
Right.
It's easy to fall into that trap.
This story, it encourages us to think about those moments when the answer seems too simple, or maybe even illogical. Are we willing to trust those small acts of obedience, those little steps of faith? They might actually be the key to something incredible, a breakthrough, healing, something we never expected.
So what are our own bronze serpent moments? The ones we're dismissing, the ones we're not even seeing?
That's the question, isn't it?
Something to think about for sure. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
My pleasure. I always love exploring these stories.